President.
The junior senator from North Dakota is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President, for the time. I wanted to get down here.
Senators
I'm sorry.
notified during a quorum
I
call.
would ask unanimous consent.
It's not objections ordered.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I wanted to get down here and spend a few minutes continuing the conversation about this infrastructure package that's before us and that we'll be voting on soon, or at least the next step of that. And I think to start things off, I first of all want to express my great disappointment that we have squandered not minutes, not hours, but now several days. Several days we've been negotiating, evidently, quote, amendments package. And I'm in my third year here, and I still don't understand the way the Senate can not do things as opposed to do them. And I get that every senator has these incredible powers and authorities and can obstruct whatever they want, and I honor that. When the time's right, maybe I'll do the same. I don't know. But I do think it's unfortunate that we have this, what's really a pretty good bill to start with. But now that we've opened it up for the last week or so to the opportunity for the rest of our members who weren't on the committees of jurisdiction that heard a lot of this, that are seeing a lot of this for the first time several days ago, to now improve upon it. And I say improve because I'm familiar with a number of the amendments, and they're really good amendments, and they should be passed. Some aren't as good. I would vote against them. Maybe we'd kill most of them. The point isn't whether we'd pass them or kill them. The point is that we should be voting on them. We should be voting. And I know there's hundreds of them, and that can take a long time, and absent an agreement, we don't have the time. Either way, we ought to be voting on them. We ought to be taking the time to vote on amendments. And so I'm disappointed we aren't. I'm still hopeful that in these waning hours, maybe we can get a couple of them. I just find it frustrating that we're not, that we're sitting here speaking instead of voting. That said, I want to, again, express appreciation to the leadership of the bipartisan group. Senator Portman, Senator Sinema have done incredible work proving that the Senate can work. Building on the framework that was passed by the Environment and Public Works Committee and Commerce Committee and some of the work that's being done by other committees, building on that framework, adding some more infrastructure to an already robust infrastructure package. High priorities for Republicans, high priorities for Democrats, in most cases priorities for both. I think that's the way a 50-50 Senate should expect to work, and I think does work. I think one of the things that's most heartening to me that I've seen so far is not even so much the work that's been done, but the work that's been acknowledged. I mean, when I look at the list of organizations that support this, it's a list, I don't know, 140, 150 organizations long, and what I like about it is the diversity of the list. I see that, for example, that the Business Roundtable supports it. Well, you know, those are the biggest companies in America. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce, they represent a wide range of businesses. But so does my local convenience store and the paving company. So does the AFL-CIO. So does the Small Business Roundtable. I love the fact that the Farmers Union and the Farm Bureau support this infrastructure package. That tells you a little bit of something about how compromise and common ground is found, not just by senators. We're a reflection of the people that we work for. I love looking at the list of agriculture entities besides the Farmers Union and the Farm Bureau, but the commodity groups, just about every one that's represented in North Dakota, even the beekeepers. North Dakota is #1 in honey production. The beekeepers support this, as do, like I said, pretty much every other commodity group. I think one of the other things that encourages me as somebody who believes strongly in federalism, as somebody who believes strongly in self-governance as a reflection in Washington of the people back home, is the fact that the Council of State Legislatures supports this. That's where the rubber meets the road in many cases. And if that's not close enough to home, how about the Association of Counties supports this legislation? Now, those are the guys that really know about roads and bridges, They're the ones that are hearing from the constituents on a regular basis. And when they aren't hearing about it from them, they're driving them themselves. And they know where the potholes are. They know where the crumbling bridges are. They know where the roads need repair or where a new road might be built. And if that's not close enough to home, how about the League of Cities? Our mayors in our big cities and our small towns support this legislation. That tells you they're the ones that have their ear to the ground. And of course, our governors. The National Association of Governors supports this. My point being that this isn't something that came from on high. This is not some sort of an ivory tower, contrived in the dome, under the dome of the United States Capitol. These are senators, leaders, who are a reflection of the people back home, the folks back home. Small business, large business, medium-sized business, local government, county government, state government. Even the Association of Agriculture, State Agriculture Department supports it. Our agriculture commissioners support it. Why would an agriculture commissioner care about infrastructure? Why would a commodity group care about infrastructure? I think it's pretty obvious. Infrastructure is what moves our products to market. Oh, and by the way, in case you wonder if broadband is infrastructure, I know there are some people saying that's not real infrastructure, that's not, quote, hard infrastructure. You can't do a transaction today without broadband. Even if you order a load of soybeans or you sell a load of soybeans, it's going to take the broadband internet connection to do the transaction at some point. You might make a deal over the phone and somebody send you a check. I don't know, but your local elevator needs high-speed internet, and on it goes. I always like to use the illustration of food, because I think food, which we grow a lot of in North Dakota, and by the way, if we had to eat it all, it'd be impossible. If we had to just use it all in the United States of America, it would be impossible. We grow food for the world. For the world. Hungry people all over the world need what's grown in places like North Dakota and Ohio and other parts of our great country. We talk a lot about soybeans. Remember, in the last couple of years, we've heard a lot about the importance of soybeans and getting soybeans to market, getting them to the Pacific Northwest. Well, guess how that happens? The way it happens is the farmer combines the soybeans after they've, of course, planted and nourished and then harvested the soybeans. And they get them to an elevator, a grain elevator. And it takes a truck to do that. And by the way, the trucks that go out in the field now, these aren't little pickup trucks. These aren't even big grain trucks. These are big semi-trailer trucks. And they need good roads and bridges. And they get those beans to the elevator, and the elevator markets them, or in some cases they put them in their own bins, wait for the price to go up, protect them. But at some point they get on a train and they go to a place like Seattle or someplace in the Pacific Northwest. And then they get on a ship from there. Well, you can't get on a ship unless you have a railroad track that gets you to the port. Oh, and then you need the port. You need an adequate waterway. And then those soybeans go someplace else in the world to feed hungry people. My favorite illustration, of course, is the pasta. And the reason I like to brag about pasta is not because there are a lot of Italian foods and Italian restaurants in North Dakota, but we are the #1 producer of durum wheat. And durum wheat is produced on these massive fields in the Midwest, mostly in North Dakota, a little bit in Montana, some in Canada. But that durum wheat, again, the farmer takes it off the field, takes it by truck to the grain elevator. But from there it has to go to a mill, where it's milled into semolina flour. And the semolina flour is sent somewhere where it's then made into pasta of all types. But the 750,000 people in North Dakota can't eat all the pasta that's made in the United States of America. So pasta's got to get to other places. In some cases, it's Manhattan, Los Angeles, or it might be some country overseas. Once again, pasta's lightweight. That couldn't even go by air. Oh, that brings in the airports, which, by the way, bring a lot of the tourism traffic to and from our great nation. The point is that the reason there are some 150, 200 organizations, large and small, medium size, The reason that the overwhelming people in the United States of America support this infrastructure package is because they know of the importance of it. The other thing that I love about infrastructure is that it pushes against inflation. Mr. President, we're experiencing real inflation in this country. And some call it transitory, which I guess is a cooler word for temporary. I think inflation's always temporary. Hopefully it's always temporary. The question isn't whether it's transitory, temporary, or permanent. The question is, when's it over? When's it going to be over? Well, one of the challenges, and by the way, rightfully so, I mean, we spent a lot of money last year, lots of money to keep our economy afloat. And not just so much to keep the economy afloat, as much as keep people afloat. We didn't know what this crisis was going to bring, this pandemic of ours. We didn't know how long businesses would be shut down. We didn't know how long the global businesses would be shut down, and global markets would be accessible or inaccessible. And so to keep people whole, we borrowed a lot of money, we printed a lot of money, our Federal Reserve provided a lot of liquidity into the marketplace. That's all contributing to the demand side of our economy, the demand side. Well, when you have a lot of liquidity, a lot of cash, again, call it stimulus, call it a safety net, whether it's paycheck protection program for small businesses or direct payments to families, or forgiveness of loans, or moratorium on evictions for landlords and renters. Whatever you want to call it, it's a lot of money. And it's money on the demand side of our economy. The problem with that, of course, is there's not a supply to support that demand. When you can't shop, that's a problem. When the supply chain of manufactured goods is broken, or you can't get lumber from a neighboring state or from Canada, that's a supply problem. But infrastructure, see, spends the money on the supply side of the economy. It pushes back against inflation by doing that. How does it do that? Well, it does it by all the ways I've talked about, obviously. Opening up the supply chain. Guess what? Infrastructure that's the means of the supply in the chain. That's how you get inputs. It's how you get the finished products back out to the market, is on this infrastructure. So it helps the supply chain side for sure. But it also puts people to work in a big way. Obviously, if you're moving commerce to market, that's people. That's people working. Whether it's working on the train or on the railroad, whether it's working on the building of bridges and roads, or building out the infrastructure, stringing the fiber optics and burying them under the ground, hooking them up to homes and businesses and institutions, or whether it's driving the trucks or working at the factory, you're helping the supply side. And at the end of it, you have an asset. The great thing about a 5-year spending package like this, a 5-year authorization package, is you're building an asset that's going to last well beyond the 5 years. Now, when you just give cash as a stimulus, it may last a day, it may last 6 months, and maybe it gets saved for a couple of years. But it's not. But we're talking about a transportation infrastructure that lasts decades, decades. That's why the Penn Wharton study shows that it actually pays for itself, even if you didn't have any pay-fors, and we can talk about that in a little bit. Over the course of time, the economy actually pays back the government for infrastructure. That's what pushes against inflation. That's what helps keep inflation down. That's what balances the demand with the supply. And so there's lots of good reasons for us to do this. I want to talk a little bit about this, the pay-fors, because it's been so talked about, and I think in many cases grossly misrepresented. The pay-fors for the $550 billion new spending are real. I know that everybody waited with bated breath for the CBO to prove us wrong. And yet the CBO proved exactly what we thought it would prove. It proved that where they can score, and by the way, can I just say, these are word salads, words like score, pay fors, filibuster. These are word salads that if you stopped 100 people at the mall in Fargo or Bismarck 99 wouldn't even know what you're talking about. But this is what we're trapped with here, are these archaic processes. So anyway, we'll talk about new spending pay fors and what the Congressional Budget Office can score. They're confined to what they can score. And some of it makes sense. They're accounting terms, they're government accounting terms, and they make sense. They identify a whole bunch of legitimate pay fors, or at least what they call scores. But they also recognize that there are a lot of things they can't score that actually do pay for this infrastructure. For example, the $53 billion from certain states that would come back as unused unemployment insurance benefits. That's real money. They can't, quote, score it because, of course, it's already been appropriated. And there is, in theory, nowhere in reality, there is in theory that somehow that $53 billion might not be spent by the government. I've never seen that happen, but, I suppose theoretically it could. But believe me, it's a pay-for. It's real money. So they don't call it a score, they call it an estimate. There's another estimate, $67 billion from proceeds from the C-band spectrum auction. Now, the reason they can't call it a pay-for, or can't score it, is because that $67 billion has already come in. The auction was in February of this year, so it's already in. Theoretically, it could maybe not be spent. Therefore, it can't be, quote, scored. But it's going to be real money. It is real money that exists that doesn't require taking it from anybody else. No tax increases, no new taxes, $67 billion. And that's called, quote, a estimate, not a score. There's an analysis, I think a pretty conservative one, by the way, $53 billion in economic growth. Remember I talked about the Penn-Wharton study that showed over the decades, the economy would literally pay for the entire investment. But that's not how we do government, and I understand that, and we shouldn't. But even the CBO, in their analysis, concludes that $53 billion would come back. Now, they can't score that. It's just an analysis. But it's real money. And by the way, it's very conservative. Now, I know there's a lot of political rhetoric that flies back and forth, and these word salads that Republicans like to use, and word salads that Democrats like to use to talk about the same things. And we tend to talk to our people, if you will, to rationalize or convince or persuade, and that's all good. That's all fine. But I know this much for sure. I don't think there's a single American that thinks we ought to fall behind our adversaries any further. We are under real economic challenges, global economic challenges by our adversaries, not the least of which, of course, is China. China's fast becoming the #1 economy in the world. They are by far the largest population, other than probably the only thing close would be India. And yet China has made it a strategic decision to overcome the United States as an economic powerhouse, along with, by the way, a very, very advanced and efficient military. They don't pay people to join the military, they just make them join the military. Their money goes a long ways, and whatever technology they can't discover or create, they steal. This is not a small threat. And one of the advantages they have is that they've been investing at a very fast and very aggressive rate in their infrastructure, all forms of infrastructure, highways, bridges, roads, internet, water, ports. And by the way, they invest in a lot of other countries' infrastructure to both win them over and then to use it as leverage against other countries. So, Mr. President, there's lots of good reasons to support this bill as it comes time to, first of all, finalize, of course, the substitute, the amendment that makes up the bill, and then get on to final passage. I'm going to wrap up where I started, however, and that is to just stress how disappointed I am that we haven't been voting on amendments. There are some really good ones out there. In fact, the best ones I know of were introduced by Republicans and Democrats together, equally. And we'd be wise to, all of us, to just agree. Maybe it's not the top 10, maybe it's not the top 20 amendments, but even if it's the top 4, 5, you know, let's recognize that the bill can still be improved in these final hours, and get some folks down here. Let's get the 100 of us together and make some decisions together while the hours are still in front of us. Improve this bill so we can get about the business of debating it, getting us to final passage, and sending it over to the House of Representatives, where I would implore, plead with the Speaker of the House to take it up, apart from this $3.5 to $5.5 trillion tax and spend wish list of the Democratic Socialists. Take it up and do something good for the country, and then we'll get about the business of debating the next big package. With that, I yield the floor.